2024 poll that was conducted by CBS YouGov found that, quote, 72% of voters do not believe Biden has the mental or cognitive health to serve as president, as well as nearly half of his own party. What do you make of that?
As I said, I'm not a poll expert. I don't know if that was the sense of him going forward in the job or in the job, but what I do know is I had firsthand knowledge of interacting with him all the time, and he was completely suited to be president, capable of making the very hardest decisions.
Do you think the voters who had these concerns were reasonable in having them?
I don't have a perspective on that. I mean, they would not have those concerns if they had the privilege I had, which was being at his side those days.
I think one of the things that you said that was discussed to push back on this perception of President Biden's age was having him not speak in a suit and tie. Were you successful in those efforts?
I think there was some progress on that front.
Was he, did he in fact, was it effective in pushing back against the narrative?
I don't have the ability to gauge that.
I think one of the things you said was applying makeup to the president was discussed.
Sorry.
Did you, who did you have that discussion with?
I was going to say, I know that was a topic of discussion. I was never in any deep discussions around that, but I was aware of the desire for him to, in public settings, make sure that makeup was applied, which, going back to my Obama days, that happened also, clearly. But there was, let's make sure that we have the discipline of that for public appearances.
Returning to the long list, what was the nature of your conversations with Vice President Harris regarding these issues?
I had regular meetings, standing meeting once a week that probably happened 2 or 3 times a month on average.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So, in other words, what I gained from that is basically they wanted to give you a carefully curated fantasy scene of Joe Biden being this strong leader. He's just so impressive, and he's got an IQ of over 9,000. This is what they wanted. They wanted to give you a fantasy, folks, a narrative. They wanted to make you think that Joe Biden was okay, knowing in their mind that he wasn't okay. He's not up for the job. He's not up for making all these tough decisions, these snap decisions that, the leader of the free world should be making. No, they wanted to give you fantasy, folks. That's all they wanted to give you, putting makeup on the president, right? Well, you could put makeup on a pig, but it's still going to be a pig, right? As the saying goes. And I love all this, folks. We're going to get deep off into this thing. I just love going through these because it gives you, once again, it gives you some insight into where these people's brains were. And you can kind of pick out here and there what they were actually thinking between all the lies and all the nonsense garbage that comes out. Like, he gets to talking about Obama in this thing, so you guys make sure and buckle up for that. Smash that like button for me, subscribe if you're new around here, share this video anywhere and everywhere you can, click the join button and all that goobly gobbly stuff, and let's just get into it, right?
With the vice president, I don't recall anything specific, but clearly this issue of ages are one of, if not the biggest challenge here. She too pushed on, making sure that he was in the right settings and presented at his strongest from public appearances.
Did Vice President Harris ever just ask you something along the lines of, Mr. Zients, is he okay?
No, not that I can recall.
When was the last time you spoke with Vice President Harris?
The vice president called me once in that first month or two. She and the second gentleman were on the phone, and it was probably 3 minutes just saying hi. Otherwise, I've not spoken to her.
In the first month or two, you mean post-administration?
Yes, thanks for clarifying. Yes, after January 20th.
And your conversations with President Obama regarding age, what was the nature of those conversations?
Look, I think it's been widely reported that President Obama, post the debate, thought that the president should consider getting out of the race. I want to emphasize, we never had any discussion about his ability to do the job.
But did President Obama raise concern about his ability to win re-election?
Yes.
When was that conversation?
I had some contact with President Obama around the turn of the year, so these dates are always tricky, 2019 going to 2020. And he felt that the campaign was not enough of an emphasis in terms of the balance with governing and campaign, and he was pushing for more time, more resources, more leadership on the campaign. So he was worried about the re-elect prospects. And then I had the contact that I just talked about post the debate. Now, I want to be clear that I was in touch with President Obama other times because he, was someone that one could get advice from, but specifically on AI and AI policy, which was an emphasis, particularly in the 18 months of my tenure, last 18 months of the administration. And President Obama took a real interest in AI and technology, so we would do periodic meetings with him where I'd gather some of the team and we would get his views, and it was really helpful.
That's interesting. President Obama, how often would you have conversations with him about AI, do you think?
I bet we had 5 or 6 conversations across the 18 months.
Did he weigh in on policy?
Yeah, he just provided his perspective on what was happening. He's very tied into the tech community. So it was good to get his perspective.
I'll get myself in trouble if I ask many questions about AI because I know nothing about AI. Is President Obama a Grok guy?
I don't know.
During your conversations with President Obama, did he ever ask you if, in fact, President Biden was okay?
I don't recall any specific things about that. I mean, is he able to win? It was certainly a part of it. But I think President Obama, here I'm going to be very unclear on dates, and I helped schedule, my office helped with the scheduling of this, I remember. Did come to spend time with President Biden. I feel like it was maybe the spring of 2020. And they spent time together, and I think he walked out. I don't want to put words into the president's. They were talking about the re-elect, and he walked out of that feeling good that the focus was there and that it was a winnable race.
Sorry, 2020 or 2024?
Sorry, 2024. My apologies. The struggle was always with when is the election, but yes, 2024. Thank you for clarifying.
You answered in the affirmative to my question regarding health, age, or ability to be president for Ms. Annie Tomasini. What was the nature of those conversations?
It's the age part of that, and it was around the topics that we've been talking about. How do we get him more time to, do his reading? How do we make sure he has appropriate family time? How do we make sure that when he's in public, he's presenting clothing and other things at the very, very best? Things of that nature.
Did you ever speak with Ms. Tomasini about any kind of physical accommodations that could be made to account for President Biden's physical aging?
There was and this has been reported on, and so I don't recall the specific conversations about, ensuring that the stumble, the fall that he had, which could happen to any of us, right? That it not happen again or minimize the probability of that. And so how do you reduce the number of steps and things of that nature? So that's been reported on publicly, so that's jogged my memory. Annie was point for the president, so she was always thinking about, his well-being and making sure he got his exercise sessions in and all the rest.
I've read the reporting on fewer steps being used in various settings for President Biden. Similarly, was there ever any discussion about distance, having distance being an issue for President Biden to walk or anything like that?
I think that was part of the same conversation, just minimizing the steps as we talked about. I don't have specific recall, but that sounds possible.
Have you ever had conversations with Ms. Tomasini about events being too late in the day for President Biden?
There was always overseas travel, which I did none of in the chief of staff job. Did one overseas trip. I was the COVID coordinator, but it's a brutal schedule. And so on top of it, time changes and travel and all the rest. So there was always, particularly on those trips, consideration of how do we make sure he has some time to rest, sleep. So in those settings, absolutely. And if you're, the national security advisor, you're pushing for as many meetings, as many dinners, as many meals, just getting that balance right.
So just to return to Ms. Tomasini, is it your testimony that your conversations with her regarding age or health were limited to the perception of age and a few physical accommodations that needed to be made to account for his physically getting older?
There's also discussion, particularly if he was under the weather, of balancing his schedule accordingly. Sleep and making sure there was enough time for him to get a decent amount of sleep. So yes, I don't want to say it was only the perception part of this.
Did you ever have any conversations with Ms. Tomasini about any kind of medication or medical treatment that the president should or was in fact receiving?
Not that I recall.
Do you remember having any conversations with anyone in the White House besides Dr. O'Connor regarding the president's medications or medical treatments?
No, as you say that, there was, and I think this was reported on, he had sleep apnea. And the reason I know that is there was, speaking of perception, there was a photo or something on television that showed, what I assume I don't have sleep apnea, but the bands or whatever it is that were required. So there was discussion of, sleep apnea in the context of the press saying, what are those marks or whatever it was. Obviously there were issues. I think he got COVID twice while he was president. And that was a tricky period of time when someone has COVID and they're president of the United States. So there's a lot of discussion about that in terms of him, getting the right space to recover, and also the protocols of the White House and interacting with him.
Part of the reason I ask is because Hunter Biden has recently said in a podcast interview that prior to the debate, I'm putting they in air quotes because he wasn't clear who provided Ambien to the president before his debates with President Trump. Are you aware of anybody giving the president Ambien?
If anyone would have given him Ambien, it would have been his doctor. Other than that reporting, I have no recollection of Ambien and the president. But that, Dr. O'Connor saw the president on a daily basis and was his doctor.
And
So bottom line, I have no idea.
understood. And just to, not to make the list longer than it already is, but to just to be clear, you have never spoken with the First Lady about medication the president was receiving or a medical treatment the president
I
was
have
receiving.
no recollection.
What was the nature of your conversations with Ms. Jean-Pierre about the president's health, age, or ability to be president?
I have no specific on her. Karine was part of a daily meeting I did in the Chief of Staff's office, along with 10 or 12 other senior members of the team. And every day at 8:15. And so she was there, and as we talked about, it was not an infrequent conversation around this perception of age and how we use the president's time, and so she would have been exposed to all of those issues. I don't know if she would also be getting barrage of questions all the time, and some of those were probably age-related. So it could very well be that at that table or in smaller settings, I might have been part of conversations that were, how does Karine respond to this question or that question?
Did Ms. Jean-Pierre ever ask whether the president was in fact capable of doing his job?
No.
What was the nature of your conversations with Bill Daley regarding the president's health, age, or ability to be president?
Daley, I knew from the Obama administration. He was chief of staff for a year or so when I was over at OMB. And actually knew Bill a little bit prior to entering government, a little bit from the private sector. So I talked to other chiefs of staff occasionally, going back to the Whipple chief of staff best practices.
One of the experts.
What's that?
One of the experts.
Yes, one of the experts. In fact, chiefs of staff, both Republican and Democrats. I hosted a dinner of former chiefs of staff at my office, at my house twice. So Bill called specifically on this issue. Bill called, and I'm not going to get the timing precise here. I would have said, I'll get the year right, spring of 2024, with feedback that he didn't think the president should debate. So it would have been in the spring, because that's when the decision was being made about the debate. That he didn't think that debating the former president would be a good setting for President Biden, or, frankly, I think Bill thought it was very difficult to debate the former president, period.
But President Biden had previously debated President Trump. So what had changed?
Bill had, I think the primary, this is my recollection, the primary issue is what I just said. I think Bill, if I'm recalling correctly, had also seen President Biden recently and thought that the idea of him spending his time that way in that kind of setting would not help with this perception of age.
How did your conversation with Mr. Daley relate to, I guess you just answered my question as I was thinking. Could you repeat that for me?
I think there were two components. One, I think, and I don't want to put words in Mr. Daley's mouth, but this is my recollection. It was all of like a 5-minute call. But I remember I was in my West Wing office and he asked to speak, so I took the call. And I think there were two things. One, I think, my recollection is that he thought that debating the former president was not a good thing for anyone to do. He didn't think that the debate would be one that necessarily followed the rules. And then secondly, he did not think that the president in that setting that would help with this public perception issue of his age.
Do you know why?
I don't know, but he was strong in his advice that the president should not debate. Now, that was not the advice we followed. The president debated.
Was it just the one conversation that you had with Mr. Daly where this question of age had come up?
I believe so, but we're going back in time, but I believe so.
I think we'll pause there, and we'll go off the record.
Okay, so a whole lot of blah, 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 and a few little interesting tidbits in there. Of course, Obama is going to be worried about the former president or the former vice president or whatever the hell you want to call him, right? Joe Biden. Of course he's going to have concerns. He knew when Joe Biden was fully cognizant of his surroundings, for crying out loud, that he would completely screw stuff up. Never underestimate Joe Biden's ability to screw things up. That's not a direct quote, folks, but that's almost verbatim, right? But anyway, getting back to this, of course he's going to have concerns. Everybody should have had concerns. We had concerns, as a matter of fact, in the 2020 debate when we saw inklings of Joe Biden's senility, if you will. He's going dementiatic, for crying out loud. We all noticed this. It was just inklings, though, right? You could tell. He was much more stern and much more forceful with his language than he was definitely from 2022 on, right? From 2022 on, he was just gone. The dude wasn't even there anymore. He declined very, very rapidly. But I love that. Like, why did you not take these people's concerns hang on, you mean to tell me that the excuse as to why you didn't want to debate Trump was because, you were scared Donald Trump wouldn't follow the rules? Are you kidding me with that? Like, that must be a joke. You're scared he's not going to follow the rules? Wouldn't that be a good thing for Joe Biden? You got a man over here going off the freaking walls, crazy bull in a china shop type of stuff, breaking rules all over the place. Wouldn't that look good on the guy that's over here just stoic and following all the rules and laying down all the points? If this man was such a dynamo in the background, don't you think that would have been the perfect venue to assuage concerns that the population was having with Joe Biden's age? That would have been the perfect venue to do that. Once again, Donald Trump, we know he comes off the chain. We know he does and gets rowdy and gets crazy and is going to break the rules. Oh, my goodness. We love Donald Trump for those things, as a matter of fact. But you mean to tell me that's the reason? It's not because Joe Biden's cognitive abilities, for goodness sakes? Like, why do these people just insist on lying to everybody, knowing, once again, the clothes are off here? The emperor absolutely has no clothes. Once that debate was over with, as a matter of fact, once it began, to be frank, we all knew the curtain had fell, y'all. Like, fell off the stage, as a matter of fact, and we saw behind the scenes. We saw everything. We saw that Joe Biden, and there was no more denying it at that point. You even had hacks for the Democratic Party, like in the mainstream news, like Jake Tapper, Alex Thompson, and these people actually write a book attacking the president, attacking his cognitive abilities, attacking the fact that he was too old to do the job. His gait was stiff, like spilling the beans on all kinds of nonsense. They went around through the White House staff asking people, interrogating staffers essentially, to get the dirt on the big guy, right? 10% for the big guy, if you will. I love all this, folks. These people are just absurd. That's all they are, just completely absurd. They're still trying to put up this narrative that Joe Biden was a dynamo in the background. He's completely capable. You heard Mike Donnellan, I believe, say that he thinks that Joe Biden is still fine to be president. Have you guys seen Joe Biden's recent appearances on TV? Yeah, they're not better than they were when he was president. No, he's getting worse. People age. We understand these things. But when you have a concern about a politician's age, especially the President of the United States, it is not the age that we are actually concerned with. Sure, age is a factor in a whole formula that people generally calculate all of these factors, right? His speech, his gait, everything, right? His euphemisms, the way he carries himself, his pronunciations, for crying out loud. All of these things factor in. People notice and pick up on all these things. You really think that the American people, 70% of the American people are just dumb? Oh, well, if they had my privilege, oh, no, those fears would be assuaged just outright. I could assuage these fears instantly if they had my privilege. Like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, no. As a matter of fact, we would be able to see even more clearly that Joe Biden was not in charge. We all know Joe Biden wasn't in charge. Like, I just don't understand why they're trying to keep up the lie. Right? Like, I still beg the question, what kind of criminal charge could you get for keeping a president in there that's senile, that's going dementiatic, for crying out loud? What, is that against the law? Oh, because you didn't invoke the 25th Amendment? Like, seriously. Once again, folks, when that her report came out, the Joe Biden's classified documents report, that he wasn't going to prosecute because he's a well-meaning, doddering old man with a poor memory. He's not fit to stand trial, but yet he is fit to govern the nation. That was a contradiction in terms right there, if you ask me. That was when the clothes came off completely for everybody to see. Because if this man, he was a quote-unquote Republican, which he's not a Republican, by the way, because any Republican would have absolutely went after Joe Biden for that, because that was a clear-cut case. It was easy, simple. Joe Biden retained classified documents before he became president, when he had no authority or authorization to retain classified documents. I know those might sound like the same thing, but, you know, the authority, basically his own authority, and authorization being from somebody else, in other words. But anyway, he retained classified documents for decades, folks. That was the problem. That was the difference between Trump and Joe Biden. Trump took presidential records home. Joe Biden had been hoarding classified, sensitive documents for decades, since he was a senator. Keeping them in his freaking garage, for crying out loud, of all places. And in several places. We all know about all this. But he refused to prosecute because, oh, well, we don't think a jury would actually convict. I'm sorry, my dude. Have you talked to the general public lately? Because you got at least one person right here that would instantly convict. Give me all the evidence. Let me look at it. Okay, hang on. He's been hoarding classified documents for freaking decades. Hang on. He wanted to keep those classified documents to write a book on so he could make money off of. Shared classified information with his ghostwriter, for goodness sakes, who also was not authorized to retain sensitive information. This is all absurd, y'all. It really, really and truly is absurd. This whole thing. I love going over all these, by the way, because once again, you know, they keep telling on themselves just a little bit at a time, folks. Just a little tiny bit at a time. And I'm here for it, folks. But I think that's all I got on this one. I want y'all to let me know what y'all think about all this down in the comment section. It blows my lid right off the top of my head, y'all. Just poof, and it's gone. Exposed brain matter and all. But that's all I got. Y'all don't forget to smash that like button for me. Subscribe if you're new around here. Share this video anywhere and everywhere you can. Click the join button, sign up, and become a member. That's what you need to do. You need to want to do that. Anyway, enough of all that. But you guys just remember out there, look, you know, God has a plan for all of us. And He does love each and every one of you out there. You just got to turn yourself over to Him. Give your life to Christ. And your life will change for the better. Abso-freaking-lutely. But, like I said, you guys try to have a good day. Stay legitical. Peace.